Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Todd and Taylor Show. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask.
I almost forgot the name of the show.
I almost forgot my name. So we're off to a rousing good start, Todd.
Yeah, we've had a hilarious conversation. Where Taylor asked me not to mention this, but during this conversation, he was trying to find the name of an actor, and he said, Scott Caan's dad. So,
You know what, though? Don't rag on me, because Scott Caan is an actor in his own right. I would imagine there's a swath of people out there who know him more than his father's work, and there's
that guy, the father of that guy from Hawaii Five-0, the remake.
He was in the Ocean's movies. He's been in stuff.
That's true. That's
with
how I
Casey
thought of
Affleck.
That's how I thought of Casey Affleck, because when I think of him, I think of the two of them together.
I didn't realize that was Casey Affleck in the Ocean's movie for the longest time. It took me, somebody had to actually point out to me that was Casey. I was like, really?
Oh, wow.
It is? Yeah, for whatever reason, just never occurred to me. Yeah. He was a younger Sprout then. He didn't quite look as distinguished or as seasoned as his brother. I mean, now you can tell he and Ben look related. At the time, not so much.
Not to go on another tangent, but were they both? Was Casey in The Town with Ben?
I believe so.
I think so too. The Town was so good.
I still haven't seen it.
Oh my gosh, you'll love it.
John Hamm's in it. Holy crap! Wow, I didn't realize Rebecca Hall was in this either.
Oh, it's really good.
Yeah, he's not, as far as I can see, unless he was a minor role. I don't see him listed.
I just always feel like Casey Affleck is he's there in the background of Ben Affleck movies or something. Sort of like Clint Howard being in every Ron Howard production.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I know that's not true.
And what's really sad about Clint Howard? I confused him and David Cross for the longest time. I was like, I'm serious, because they kind of have especially because if you've seen Apollo 13 a few times, Clint Howard has glasses and stuff, and he looks. Hang on, am I talking about the right guy?
He's the guy that. Yeah, I mean, he's in Apollo 13. He's one of the control room guys.
When he's wearing glasses in Apollo 13, he looks just like David Cross.
Yeah, you're right. And you know what's terrifying with that comparison is if you have seen the new movie The Post, which I saw on Friday, David Cross is in that, and it took me so long to figure out to place him. I was like, I know that voice and I can see who that is, but he is in a costume and makeup that are very Clint Howard-ish and not David Cross-ish. It's a great job. Bob Odenkirk kills in The Post.
If you're a Mr. Show fan, wow! If you're a Mr. Show fan, then that movie must be.
It's so weird. You're like, wow. I mean, at first you think they're just going to be sort of the two newsroom guys that are in important scenes, but maybe not leads. But Bob Odenkirk is a lead.
That's awesome. Yeah. Bob Odenkirk, man. And granted, he's had a lot of time to practice on TV with Breaking Bad and especially Better Call Saul. But who'd have thought he would have turned out to be one of the best,
great dramatic actor? Yeah,
he's amazing. He's just he does this thing, and it's kind of like Robin Williams, right? Where Robin Williams, just like Bob Odenkirk, has a really wide range and is really good at comedy. But I think it's that understanding of heart and comedy that makes it all the more chilling when they really lock into a dramatic thing or a quieter moment or something that's not necessarily funny on the surface. It works really well. It's so good.
Well, and it's weird to think my impression of Mr. Show was always that David Cross would be the one that would kind of get the opportunities out of it. He was going to be the one that you could see in a sitcom. But Bob Odenkirk, I was like, he's just the weirdo. He's so obscure and strange. What's this guy ever going to do but be weirdos and stuff? Yeah. And so now to see him just killing it is really great.
He's when he does that thing too, where he wears and this is like Saul as a character, but he wears his guilt on his face. And even if he's trying to, create an illusion of confidence or everything's gonna be okay, right? You can just see he does something with his eyes where you're just this dude's this character, this man, the weight of his life is written right there. I don't know how he does that. I don't know if he even knows how he does that, but that's a hell of a magic trick to do. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll say that as just an endorsement of seeing The Post. As listeners may have guessed, we are not doing a Coffee and Comics episode today. We're doing kind of a catch up on some news and some other shows, mostly that Taylor's watched, and then a comic book we're both reading that's an ongoing series. So this is just kind of a catch-all show.
It's a potluck.
I was when you. I was happy to do a catch-all rather than a focused coffee and comic show, but I did especially prepare coffee because I was really excited to give you a coffee update.
Well, let's hear your coffee update since I know you're practicing. You're intentionally trying to
this is my New Year's resolution: make decent cups of coffee at home. So I switched to the Guatemala Antigua roast. It's Starbucks again. I'm just I'm baby steps. But just because this was what a barista had told me, like go for the Kenyan blends and the Guatemalan blends because that's going to make a better iced coffee. So I'm on the Guatemala today. And what I realized quickly was that even the little stuff I learned about making the Kenyan one taste good doesn't necessarily apply to the next roast. And so it was kind of disheartening to figure out, oh no, I'm not all the way back to like square zero, but I'm like, square 2 or 3. Like this is going to take me a week of working with this to get it to the right flavor,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where I am. Guatemala today.
Now let me ask you this. I know you've kind of been you're not traditionally a coffee fan. As you're getting further into this, is your appreciation of the taste of coffee or just like the mechanics of coffee improving, or does this just feel like going to the gym? Like I just got to do this. My resolution. I'm going to do it. Then I'll be done.
I really like what you said about it being chemistry, and that Taylor said that on our last episode. And that kind of, I don't know. It's like, I'm avoiding your question. Yeah. I think the thing is like, I always sort of liked different coffee tastes. I just didn't like them delivered in a hot liquid without like something, it was, to me, it was always hard to get like the milk ratio right. Cream was always like too sweet, or like half and half, and so it's just always like you put too much milk in a cup of coffee and you fucked up the whole cup of coffee,
True.
So it's like, you're like, I've ruined the balance now, and you can't necessarily get it back by adding more coffee. It's like, it's just it's like you said, you got to be a mixologist of coffee.
Yeah.
And, so anyway, I'm getting there, but I'll tell you the same tip that I used last week. I said on our show last week, it really worked for me all week during my work week, which was, so I make like 4 cups of coffee at night, put them in the fridge. Fill up my ice cube tray and then freeze that and then put the rest in the fridge. And, so then the next morning I have my, chilled coffee. I pour it over like 2 normal cubes of ice and 2 of the coffee ice cubes of ice. So the coffee ice cubes are melting, into my coffee. And I think I think that's helped get the right balance of coffee versus, water and milk and stuff.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm more into that than like when when you go get iced coffee in a coffee shop, like they're going to just dump a bunch of ice into it. And then
that's why I've never been a big fan of iced drinks at Starbucks, mainly because there was a day when I first moved to Denver. I was walking. I used to live very close to a Starbucks, like a couple blocks walking. I was walking down to a different coffee shop that wasn't Starbucks, but there was a woman walking up the hill, and she was like a kind of like the most cliche, white woman, suburbanite, early 20s, probably, just big, giant sunglasses, like purse slinging off her elbow, just the very, very kind of billowy, fluffy clothes, very high heels, and she was walking. She had like this gigantic, it wasn't the Trenta, because I don't know if the Trenta size had come out yet then for Starbucks, but it looked fairly close. It was gigantic.
Yeah, even those ventis are huge.
Oh, it's huge, and it was like a strawberry. I could tell it was like a strawberry thing, and she was like sipping it, and she was barely like the straw was barely like in her mouth, and she was like sipping it, and she stopped, and she didn't. It's not like she saw me. I was still like a block and a half away, but I could see this clearly, and she stopped. And she kind of like looked around as though like, is anybody watching? And she like set it, and she kind of like made a face, and she like set it down like it was about to explode, and she set it on the ground and walked away. She literally took her like entire like giant. It was like she took a drink and went, ew, and set it down, and then like walked away like it was going to blow up. So clearly it was on the sidewalk when I got up to it. And I looked at it and I picked it up and it was still cold. She had just bought it. So she must have just had a moment where she's like, I'm just too fat. And like put it down. And I was just like, and since that day, I look at those drinks like with just utter disgust. I'm like, this is just pudding in a cup, like chilled pudding in a cup.
Or see, I take her side, and the point I was just making about chemistry where she ordered this with some specific number of pumps of sweetener and amount of cream or whatever. And they gave it to her and she took a couple sips and was like, God damn it. Like they're just one pump over and the thing is garbage.
It's worthless. It's worthless. Putting it right here so everybody can see. Walk past it in shame and scorn. Like worthless.
I don't think I've ever done that with a venti, but there have definitely been like when I try a new brew or something at a place and I'm like, ugh. I just drop a whole cup of coffee in the trash. It's so terrible. But I've told you, I try cold brews everywhere because I'm like, there's got to be one that works for me. And I've definitely thrown a lot of cold brew away.
There's a coffee shop. When you're next in Denver, there's one near my office studio that has popped up that I think has a cold brew you might like. Like they've been, every time I walk in, because I'm a kind of a regular, they give me like a little sample here and there. And they're like, we've been working on this. What do you think? And it was a cold coffee that I was actually the first time I was very impressed. It was it had a sort of, it wasn't so watery like they sometimes are. It had kind of a texture that was really, really nice. So.
You've pointed out a really important thing, I think, of cold brew. And everyone talks about how it's less acidic. And I'm like, yeah, but it's watery. Yeah. And you can't really fix it with milk or creamer because then it's like you're drinking 3 layers of something. Like there's kind of a coffee bottom layer and a water in between and a milk on top. It's just, anyway. I'll make this note because I need to write it down later. I do think this Guatemala works better with more milk than the Kenyan one. So anyway, let's jump into it. I really like the way you've set up the notes doc to guide me through this, because these are like straight off your head, you know. Yeah. So I don't even know how to introduce Voltron because I don't even know what's going on. Is it a new series? Is it an old series that's just appeared on Netflix? Give me the scoop.
Well, we're going to talk about some Netflix things, and Voltron is one of them. Now, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. Like, I think since October, I've been like, we should talk about Voltron. I know you haven't seen it, but I was a big fan in the 80s of the original sort of anime show that had come out. At that time, like there was something about it. Like my 2 big jams in the 80s were He-Man and Voltron. I was a fan of Thundercats, but I had 3 channels growing up, and that channel was not among them, so I could never really watch Thundercats regularly unless I went to my grandparents' house or something. So I was never really in, and I watched G.I. Joe, but I was never like a big G.I. Joe toy fan. I think because they were too big, it just felt like I was playing with dude Barbies. So never quite. I mean, I didn't hate them. I was just like, it was more like, and G.I. Joe, yeah, I'm kind of a fan, I guess. But Voltron and He-Man were my jams, which coincidentally, I've been meaning to say this for a while too. As somebody who I never grew up with like Marvel, DC comics like you or other, I think others who, had, and to the point where like I always hear people talk about, when Thor is on screen, or like, I never thought in my life I would see this moment in a Marvel movie. And like, people talk about Marvel characters like they've been waiting their whole lives. And I've always been sort of jealous of that because I'm like, I love the fact that these things are being put into film, but I never quite had that attachment to a lot of this stuff. Like, I've been waiting, I read this in 25 years ago and I've been waiting this whole time. I've always kind of wanted that. And I feel like if anything happens with He-Man or Voltron, like I was thinking even the other day, like if they ever do a He-Man movie and they do it right, I'm going to have those kind of same feelings. Like, oh my God, I've been waiting to see like, this on screen. Like, and all we have for He-Man is just the Frank Langella Skeletor one, which he's great, but the rest of it's kind of, but that's, I feel like that. And so for the Voltron specifically,
well, do you want it as a live action film though? I mean,
He-Man, yes. I think there's a way to do Masters of the Universe live action now, especially that works incredibly well. Like, especially after Thor Ragnarok. I'm like, Thor embraced all its ridiculousness, and I think there's a lot of that in He-Man that can easily be done. What you have to, the trick, I think all of He-Man's easy except for one thing. Who do you cast as Adam and who do you cast as He-Man? And how do you make those things work? And what's funny about that is we're going to see that sort of demoed with Shazam, because they cast, young Billy Batson and they cast the guy Zachary Levi of Chuck as Shazam. And Zachary Levi is going to have to bulk up a little bit. But they're going to do that in a way where you get to see like this young character become this like big, powerful character. And it's basically Big. It's the movie Big, right? So you got to cast somebody as the older actor who can convey innocence, but also has this like physicality that's clearly magical or, supernatural. So with He-Man, like you got to cast an Adam, in the context of the, I know we're going to talk about Voltron in a second. Don't worry. But Adam in the context of He-Man is like, in his late teens. So you got to cast somebody who's, kind of scrawny. And then a He-Man who's bigger that can actually, but nobody recognizes He-Man as Adam. So it's got to be somebody who doesn't look just like him, but yet could be him. That's the trickiest aspect of it. Everything else, like all the ridiculous character names, the settings, like Thor Ragnarok has basically opened the door for any of that to be accepted as long as you honor the original source material. So all this is just a weird way to say, or kind of weird circular way to say, when Netflix said, "Oh, we're going to reboot Voltron under the DreamWorks Animation studio," and I was actually super duper excited because the way they sort of pitched it was, "Oh, we're going to, it'll be Netflix. It'll all come out at once. We really, really want to honor the source material, but bring it into the modern day with better editing, better storytelling." All the things that we've learned since the 80s, we're going to apply, but we're going to still give you the original sort of intent. There had been a couple of Voltron. I think there was like one weird like Lion Force series that came out on Fox or something like maybe 8-9 years ago. That was just dog shit. It was horrible. So I was just, and nobody, it kind of came and went. There wasn't really like, a companion toy set or anything. So when Netflix announced this, I was excited. And the first season came out. I was hooked because they took a lot of the original series, which, if you're not familiar, the original intent of Voltron is, and I want to make this very clear too, because a lot of people see Voltron and they're like, "Oh, this is just like the Power Rangers." That's what my fiance thought, and it's not.
Voltron is like where they have the big robot lions.
Yes, there's much more of a mythology to it. So like the whole idea is these 5 space explorers stumble onto this planet where this legend of Voltron once existed. Like thousands of years ago, there was this giant, kind of robot. What's the word that they use in like Jaeger, essentially, like this giant Jaeger. I was looking for the Pacific Rim reference, like this giant robot Jaeger that like protected the galaxy, and he was formed by 5 robot lions, and they had all, in the original series, all the lions had gone missing. And the threat, there's this galactic kind of like almost like the Empire in Star Wars. There's this galactic kind of evil force ruled by King Zarkon, who's slowly taking over more and more of the galaxy, and they need Voltron to come back to battle that off. So these 5 kind of explorers get sucked into this and end up becoming the new pilots of the Voltron, of the robot lions, and then they form Voltron, and it's like this big deal. And then one of the ways that they kind of create new threats, and at least in the original series, they create new threats for Voltron. Is Zarkon has this witch named Hagar, who's kind of like a mage / scientist. So she's able to take regular, like she's able to build like these Frankenstein monster things and then make them really big. So then she'll send them off to different planets and then has to fight Voltron. The problem with
magic and robotics exist in the same universe.
Yes, and in much the same way, again, I'll use Thor for this reference too. In much the same way, it's almost like magic and science are almost this, are almost the same thing. If you take magic far, take science far enough, it almost feels magical. So there's a little of that at play too. Strangely enough, a lot of He-Man is also like fantasy, sci-fi, kind of rolled into one. There's like a lot of the He-Man sort of tech is very scientifically, technologically driven, but then there's a lot of magic too. So honestly,
that is a really interesting point that we make. I think we make a lot of that out recently. Like that's a new thing in superhero movies, but yeah, that has actually been around for a long time. That like combining of the cyber and the magic.
Oh, totally. And it's, I mean, and I think every one of us in the 80s, like kind of was exposed to it in some facet.
Yeah.
So anyway, the new series takes all the same character names, and they really, it's interesting. Like there's I only started noticing this recently, like Silicon Valley, South Park, and this to some extent, it all uses these kind of like archetypal characters that go back to even, to Shakespeare for sure. Like if you're a big fan of Shakespeare and you know the Midsummer Night's Dream play, my favorite part of Midsummer Night's Dream is these group of characters called the Mechanicals, and they put on this play within the play, and it's probably the funniest thing Shakespeare's ever done. But each of the Mechanicals is kind of an archetypical character, and you see that played out in Silicon Valley, you see that played out in South Park, and you see it played out here too. There's like the kind of the big, kind of heavier set, bumbling, kind of like humorous one. There's like the, stick in his butt one. There's the sort of ladies' man one. There's the sciencey, geeky one. So they have these characters, and the origin story is sort of similar, but they take it in a slightly different direction, and they really, really, really pay attention to world building. So they took like all this stuff that we liked about the first one and really improved upon it incredibly. And the one thing that I really like, this is kind of a spoiler, but in the original series, there was this character called Pidge, who was like he piloted the Green Lion, and was this like smaller character and kind of like androgynous character, had like a really high whiny voice, like, "Hey guys, I'm Pidge." And you never really knew what his deal was. You're like, why is this character here? Like all the other characters are clearly like male, like pilots or, ex-criminals or something. What is Pidge? Like, is it a girl? Should it have been a girl? In the new series, Pidge is still a character, but Pidge is very clearly a girl. And then you learn this early on. This isn't like a big revelation so much as like it comes up, I think, in episode like 3 or 4 of like the first season. And it's such a welcome, refreshing surprise. And they do it. This is an example of how they take like something from the original series and make it in a really classy way, make it, honor it and really take it another step further. So it starts off, everybody thinks Pidge is a boy. They're all, instead of being kind of ex-criminals and stuff, most of the characters are part of an Earth-based like galaxy garrison, like almost like the army, like the space army or space air force. So they all meet, most of them meet there. And then they all kind of get together. But Pidge, whose real name is Katie, joins because her brother and father joined and disappeared, and she wants to find them. And she always dreamed of following in their footsteps. So when they disappear, she crafts her image. She starts wearing glasses and crafts her image to look like her brother. So she carries around this picture of her brother and her, but everybody thinks that her brother is just her and that the girl is like somebody else. So it's really cool when they reveal it that, this kick-ass character is actually this girl named Katie, but they're just going to keep calling her Pidge as like her nickname and everything. So it's really like it took a thing from the original series that everybody was kind of confused about and made it more important, more meaningful. And they take it, they really run with that character arc. Like she's one of the most compelling things in this show. But they do that with a lot of things. Like the witch Hagar in the new series has like a really, really interesting emotional backstory, and you're like, oh my god, this is how she came to be. This is how this is how Zarkon's empire came to be. Like the whole thing is given a lot of depth and a lot of context.
So not only are they faithful to the mythology that the original series set up, but they're like expanding that mythology so it almost makes more sense. And
absolutely, it's like, this is what when we watched the show in the 80s, this is what, if shows were more sophisticated back then, this is what we always kind of wanted to happen. And strangely enough, and I'll go back to He-Man one more time, when they did a revival animated series in like the early 2000s, like 2003, 2004, they brought He-Man back on Adult Swim or Cartoon Network, I think, for like a 3-season run. They did the same thing then too. They took a lot of like the stuff that, they could have delved a lot deeper on and really built up the mythology, really built up the canon while staying incredibly loyal to the characters, the character names. They gave weird things like weird costume choices or weird character designs that were like basically just there to sell toys. They actually made something out of it. And I remember at the time going, oh my God, this was made by people who loved the original 1980s series and wished it could have been so much more. Like same thing with Voltron. So you're watching this going, this is just a really goddamn good show. Like, forget that it's based on like kind of a ridiculous concept. Like, this is just a really good show. And every season has been progressively better and better. And they've thrown some really cool twists that the original series never bothered with. Like, really cool twists. The way they introduce kind of characters that we all knew back then is really interesting. And they're really running with it. And I think they just season 5 should come out soon. Season 4 debuted in the fall of last year. And where I really get sucked into it, and the reason I'm really excited, is they finally introduced a toy line to accompany it. And because when it first came out, I was looking around like, there's not a toy line anywhere. And I don't think they put one out because they didn't know how successful the series was going to be. And it's been great for Netflix. So they finally put out a toy line. The toy line has been just like the series. The toy line they really care. Like, they built a toy line that matches the show. Like in the original show, like the way the robots, like the way the lion's legs and like, the way they kind of have to manipulate the lions to get to form Voltron always left a lot on the table. It's like, well, the toys never looked like the actual lions on the show because they had to like sort of fold in a way that made them like, create a robot guy. The new toys actually, like, they built the lions on the show much more practically. So they're like, oh yeah, the lion isn't just going to, the legs aren't just going to magically disappear. Like, they have to fold and do this and go under this. And so they really made the toys match the mechanics of the lion. So the whole thing just feels like somebody really cares. Like, whoever was responsible for any of this is like, oh, we really care about this. We know the people who are going to buy these are largely going to be, like 30-something dudes who remembered back then. So I, of course, bought like all the lions and, like die-cast mini versions. So I have like a little 12-inch Voltron, assembled at my office. So I've been excited to talk about it because it's, if you never cared at all about the original series, at least watch the pilot episode of this, because they really try hard to establish something really good. And it's just a good drama. Going back to Katie real quick, /Pidge, there's an episode in season 4 that almost made me cry. It was just so emotional. It's about her trying to find her brother. And it's just, and you learn about what happened to him, and it's just really freaking good. And they're mining deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'm assuming they're going to go another 2 or 3 seasons. I can't wait to see what they do. And everything about it is amazing. So if you're looking for something to just kind of binge on the weekend, definitely look at Voltron Legendary Defender on Netflix.
Now, does Netflix have the old series as well?
They do. They don't have every season. They have what they did, and this is kind of fun. The makers of the new show kind of assembled a playlist of their favorite episodes of the old series.
Oh, okay.
They have that as, I think it's just like, if you look for Voltron, you'll see like the old kind of graphic pull up, and then it's just like, I think it's like Voltron Best of. And then they have like, I think maybe 12 to 15 episodes of the old series, which is fine, because what you realize is a lot of the old series repeats itself quite often. Like, a lot of it is kind of a monster of the week. Like, oh no, another giant robot crazy monster has landed, and then it becomes much more Power Rangers. That's, I think, where it really kind of fizzled out. It's just, there was nothing new. They never really mined anything new. And then eventually I think like they got into like some, like, here's another giant robot made of like cars and things. And it's just like, then it became Power Rangers. This is clearly, if you like Game of Thrones and world building, you'll love this show. It's very much meant for that. And it has a really nice mix of dramatic moments and like really, thrilling moments and moments of just pure levity. There's an episode where they just go to a space mall, and that's the whole episode. And it's really it's really fun, because you get to see like, oh, the economics of how like this place that they're trying to protect, you get to see a lot more of that. Like, how do these people live and act? And then you get to see like there's a princess in this, in the canon, and like she's much more kind of a military commander in this one, but she and her sort of second in command, they don't have any idea of like Earth customs, so they don't know like what a cow is, and yet they're drinking these milkshakes not knowing how milkshakes are made. So at some point they reveal like one of the other characters, Lance, is it Lance? I think, shows them how to make a milkshake, and he actually starts milking the cow. And it's hilarious because like they do this like classic anime trope where like the princess and her like number 2 like are just completely shocked, like they're frozen, and like their characters, they're animated to like, the rest of the thing goes black and white, and they're like literally like frozen in time, and they get like moved out of the shot and just kind of like drifted around because they're just shocked at the fact that like milk comes out of a cow, and that's what they've been drinking this whole time. So just like little touches like that are really good. The other really funny thing is if you're a fan of Flight of the Conchords, Murray, the character Rhys Darby, I think his name is, or Rhys Darby.
Yep.
He voices Princess Alora's number 2 in the show, so you hear his voice a lot, and there's a lot of moments where you're just like, that's definitely a Murray moment. Like only Murray would have said that.
Interesting.
Anyway,
all right. Anything else interesting on Netflix?
Yes.
I feel like I'm just leading you along here.
Black Mirror season 4 dropped over Christmas, and I have been a huge fan of Black Mirror. Strangely, the only episode of Black Mirror I'm not really a fan of is the one that everybody kind of got hooked on, which is the very, very first episode where the president or the prime minister
I was telling a friend this weekend, like, it's so heartwarming and funny, and it really introduces these lovable characters. You got to start with number 1.
Yeah.
Season 1, episode 1.
I mean, that episode really does introduce you to sort of the shocking nature of Black Mirror. But what I don't like about it is it's the only episode where, so as the show goes on, you can tell like the main conceit is how technology affects our lives in interesting and dystopic ways. Yeah. And the first episode doesn't really do that. I mean, technology is employed, but it's less about that and more about just the shocking sort of setup that you see played out. And for those of you who aren't aware, let's just spoil that episode to some degree.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can tell what the episode's about because it's pretty much revealed in the first 5 minutes.
Exactly. So basically, a member of the royal family, if I'm not mistaken, is kidnapped.
Yes.
And taken hostage, and the prime minister.
Yes, English royal family. Yes.
English royal family, and the prime minister is blackmailed, and the only way to get her back is if the prime minister goes on national TV and has sex with a pig, like an actual animal pig. Yeah. And like that, that's the whole premise. And the whole show is the whole episode is just like, will he or won't he? And he's like having these serious discussions with his like staff and cabinet. And just like, if I do this, we'll get her back, but will the soul of the nation move on? And then the whole thing is building up to will he or won't he? And so it's truly shocking, but it doesn't really have a lot to do with technology in the way that all these other episodes do. So I don't ever recommend starting Black Mirror with that episode. Which is, again, it's strange because everybody who's like, oh my God, Black Mirror started with that episode. And that was the one that sort of, shook them up to watch them. I would suggest if you want to get into the show, start with the episode White Rabbit. Or no, sorry, White Bear. God, White. Jesus. There's another episode with a rabbit. I was confusing. There's an episode called White Bear. And that is the most quintessential. It's a season, I think it's a season 1 episode. It's the most quintessential Black Mirror episode I think you'll ever see. It has everything. It has a shocking twist. It plays into a dystopic reality or a dystopic future. Technology is employed in a weird kind of creepy way. Just everything about it is awesome, and it's very unsettling. But at the very end, you're just like, oh, you really don't see the twist coming at all. At least I didn't.
Well, do you see? So we've talked briefly also about like season 3. So. These were it was a British series produced in Britain somewhere. I don't know if it was BBC necessarily or like Channel 4 or something. And then Netflix moved it here, and at which point it became largely an American production for season 3. Do you think it's pretty, is it pretty seamless? Like, does it all feel in the same family? It's an anthology series, so it's like the characters and plots change all the time, but does it still feel the same?
Because season 3 is when Netflix. It's funny. Netflix put seasons 1 and 2 up, which were exclusively British, and it was so successful. They're like, oh God, well we'll co-produce new seasons with the original team. Charlie Brooker and all those guys, all the people who invented the show are all involved. It's just a co-production American British. So you get some. It's all written by the same guy, the same creators, but like some of them are American and some of them are British. So you still have a very heavy British element there. It's just filled out with a lot of American stuff. And strangely, more and more like heavy hitter American actors are getting involved, like John Hamm and Bryce Dallas Howard, and now like a bunch of people from Breaking Bad have been involved with it. So it's just like more and more. And Jodie Foster directed an episode this season. So it's to answer your question, no, it doesn't feel like it's there's not like a jarring change. That the addition of an American sensibility, I think, makes it even more exciting, because you still have the British stuff, but then you get to see kind of how through an American lens, like what that might look like. And it's all still dystopic technological stuff. What they do with season 4, and where I'm really kind of excited, they're starting to figure out like what works. And there's also starting to go, oh, we've already shown you this. We need to dig a little deeper and amp this up a little bit more. Like, so we know the people watching this are largely familiar with the show. So let's really start showing them some cool stuff. And we got that we kind of got that last season with 3. There was an episode, and I was actually not a fan of it at first, but there's an episode called San Junipero, which is kind of like wildly regarded by the fan base as like the best episode up until season 4. I think there's a couple that might supplant it in season 4, but it was just, if you want to see it, San Junipero was less a shocking episode, and just like, like White Bear was like, oh my God, like I never saw this coming. San Junipero is a love story where there's a twist that you never see coming, but it's not like meant to disturb you. It's meant to just go, oh my God, like that's heartbreaking. And so there's a lot of that kind of too. And then they dig a little deeper. There's an episode with Domhnall Gleeson in season 2 that's also a little heartbreaking. Where it's funny. It's Domhnall Gleeson and the actress who plays Agent Carter. What's her name? She's been in other stuff too.
Haley
Atwell. Yeah. Yep. So she and Haley Atwell and Domhnall Gleeson are married. And I'll just tell you the conceit of this. Again, it's revealed in the first 5 minutes. He dies, and she has a Android kind of replicant version of him made that has his like memories downloaded into him. But he's an Android, so he doesn't have to sleep, doesn't have to eat. And you kind of see like what is the relationship when the person you love dies, and you have this sort of approximation of them back in your life. Like, what does that do to your relationship? And then those kinds of themes are carried into season 4 incredibly well. Now, where season 4 gets exciting is you start to kind of see these certain stories kind of layer on top of each other. So you get a sense of, oh, this may all be taking place in the same world or the same universe. They don't say that, and I don't think their intention is to make that clear. I think they sort of like going, oh, this could be something. There was a John Hamm episode last season in 3, kind of a Christmas an anthology episode within an anthology series. So it's John Hamm telling like 3 different stories about technology, and aspects from that episode kind of play into season 4. But it's not like a this is all in the same universe like Marvel kind of thing. You just get glimpses of like little Easter eggs, and I think that's all it's ever going to be. So they don't have to like build a world where all this has to make sense together. It's just little flashes here and there. The ending episode is called Black Museum, and again, it's another anthology within the anthology, and it takes elements of all the episodes that you've seen and kind of blends them together in really, really satisfying ways. So it's the whole thing. They're really kind of settling into understanding the mechanics of the show, digging deeper. So like if you're a fan of the show, season 4 really, really delivers, especially the first episode, which I think is the one that everybody's San Junipero last season was when everybody was talking about. Everybody was like, oh my God. There's an episode this season called SSS Callister, or the SS Callister, that is absolutely probably the other than Black Museum, I would think is the standout episode of this season. It has to do with the guy, Jesse Plemons from Breaking Bad and Friday Night Lights. If you remember him from Breaking Bad, he's forget his character's name, but he plays the sort of Aryan looking guy that comes in towards the end. Who's just really good actor. He's also in The Master. He plays L. Ron Hubbard's son in The Master. Yeah. Or not L. Ron Hubbard, but the character that Philip Seymour Hoffman was playing.
Oh, he's in The Post.
Yeah, that guy. So he's a really great actor, but he plays this virtual reality CTO at this company, and he's kind of just this lazy slob. Everybody's dumping on him, and he has his own private version of the VR program where he has built a replicated reality of his favorite. Basically, he's a big fan of Star Trek. It's just not called Star Trek in the show. It's called the SS McAllister or Callister. And so he creates his own version of that reality where he's the captain. And he scans into that reality, everybody from the real world, and they're all his crew. So they all have to like respect him and like appreciate him. And there's a twist that is really, really satisfying.
This is the one I've seen the most, screen caps and stuff. And really definitely the one they were pushing the season release with. The very Star Trek looking crew and uniforms. And even the way they shot it, where it sort of looks, like the 1960s Star Trek.
Yeah, totally. And there's the cast is actually really good. There's another actor in it who's been in Westworld and Carnival. I'm looking at the cast list right now. I think it's like Billy Magnuson.
Kristen Milioti is in it.
She's in it. And actually, there's an Aaron Paul cameo that's really, really good. I don't want to spoil it. Just for Breaking Bad fans, there's like it happens. You're like, oh, that's perfect. That's so perfect. So like they're getting really good at knowing the right things to do. Again, just like Voltron has really settled in. This is really settling in now, and you're seeing just like a lot of like confident creativity at play. And I really hope this show runs another like 10 years. I wonder at what point are they going to get to where it's either they've done everything or they feel like they have to be ever more ridiculous to make a point. So it's, at some point there's going to be an end. This show is really starting to feel like Amazing Stories or like Erie, Indiana, just this kind of anthological, Tales from the Crypt Keeper kind of feeling.
Erie, Indiana is a good one to bring up because I remember it, but I never watched it. But one thing I think is important, like because some friends were describing this to another friend who didn't know where to jump into Black Mirror, just recently, as I was saying, and this is an anthology. It is unlike American Crime Story or American Horror Story, where it's not like the whole season is one story and then the next season is a different story. The anthology is not from season to season. It's literally from episode to episode. It's much more like the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
Where every episode, like it's not, you don't have to, different directors, different stories, different characters, different settings, plots, everything. I
would even say less Twilight Zone and more like Outer Limits. I was a big fan of Outer Limits in the 90s, which again was an homage to Twilight Zone. This feels more like that because the Outer Limits always had some kind of futuristic. It seemed like it had like a futuristic kind of dystopic kind of thing. Same thing with Black Mirror, but Black Mirror is definitely focusing on how technology integrates into our lives for better or for worse. And sometimes for better. There's another episode that was kind of trying to be, I think, this season's San Junipero, where it's a world where everybody dates based on kind of this app that's on everybody's phone. So you sign up for the app and the app pairs you with somebody and then it tells you how long you get to be with that person. And that could be 12 hours. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 5 years. And you have to stay with that person until your time is up. And once your time is up, you move on. And the whole idea is the app runs you through these scenarios so that you ultimately find your perfect person. And then there's two characters who meet and kind of fall in love, but yet they have to be separated. And then you get to see how they go on with their lives through the app. And there's a really cool twist at the end of that one too, that I really liked. And that was kind of like the heartwarming episode. There's another one where a mother basically gets to spy on her daughter at all times from birth. So you get to see that's the Jodie Foster one, if I'm not mistaken, where she directed it. So there's more and more creators you can tell more creative people, writers, directors, actors are fans of the show. They want to be involved with the show. I'm glad that we haven't seen like a crazy rash or uptick in anthology series following this. I think we could use maybe one or two more, but I'm glad, like it would seem to be the easy thing. Like, let's just every network do an anthology. This is working. They're even, I think, is it Amazon or somebody's bringing back Amazing Stories. So we'll have that to look forward to. But I'm glad these are hard to do correctly. Like I'm glad we just haven't seen a fit. I don't want to see Dwight from The Office like pop up in some like here's the 10th anthology series on Crackle. It's just like we don't need that. We just need it needs to be its own thing, and then at some point it'll be done, and somebody will find a new twist on it. But definitely, if you're those two things, I would highly recommend Netflix if you are looking for something new. Voltron, Legendary Defender, and Black Mirror season 4. If you want to get into Black Mirror, start with the episode White Bear. I promise you, it'll be worth it. That episode alone really encapsulates everything the show's about.
Yeah. And again, you don't have to watch in any order. You don't have to start with a particular season.
Exactly.
I would say follow your advice, start with White Bear, and then just kind of hop around and see, what you like.
Definitely. While we're on the topic of Netflix, I do want to mention this. We don't have to dwell on this too long, but there is a lot of talk that Apple, with all their newly repatriated money, if that comes to pass, might buy Netflix. And I didn't know I was curious to see if you had any thoughts on that. We hadn't really discussed that. I don't know if you even knew about that, but
I hadn't heard the rumors until you put it in the notes, and then I looked it up, and at least saw a couple of financial analysts saying it's too late, or one tech analyst saying just pointing out that Apple generally likes to build its own service rather than buy existing services. So I hope that's true, that it's too late for them to buy it, because I like Netflix a whole lot more than I like Apple. And I always have that fear when Apple, that you got to get stuck in the Apple ecosystem to enjoy something like that. And honestly, I like the Netflix ecosystem better than the Apple one. So yeah. Have you heard, is there more serious chatter about it over the last week or so?
Not so much. Just I think more people were learning that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I think some of it comes down to whether or not Trump creates a scenario which allows Apple to repatriate their money. So basically, the long and the short of it is Apple has billions and billions and billions. I think it's like 200 billion plus in overseas accounts that they're sheltering for tax purposes. And let's just be honest, they don't want to pay a bunch of taxes, so it's just sitting over there. So there's a whole they're talking at the federal level of a sort of a one-time sweetheart deal where Apple gets to pull that money back into the U.S. without a lot of tax hurdles, but they'll have to do something with it. They'll have to reinvest it somehow. Well, if you have 200 billion plus, in addition to just your other reserves, that's not their entire cash reserve. They've got a lot more money in the U.S. But what do you do with that? What kind of things do you buy? And I don't know if Netflix is available for that price, but that would, I think that's the first thing that popped to mind. And considering that Apple has had a really hard time getting their own content arm off the ground, let's be honest, Planet of the Apps, or whatever the hell that show is just not good. It's just the little things they've tried are just not great. And there's one, it worries me because they have bought things and have reappropriated them in the past. The original iTunes software was another program that they had purchased and then retweaked into iTunes, and that actually worked out. They bought Beats Music, and Beats hadn't even been around because Beats was Mog or Moog or something, and then they bought that. Jay-Z and Dre and Jimmy Iovine bought that and turned that into Beats. And actually, what was the original incarnation of Beats was actually pretty good. It's a great UI. I was still a Spotify fan, but I thought it was a really good competitor. Well, Apple bought Beats, and instead of just incorporating it as is, which was it already looked and kind of felt very Apple-like, right. They spent 8 months and made it worse. They just completely ruined what it was, and I don't understand why that happened. I have a terrible feeling if they buy Netflix, the same thing could happen. They might meddle with it too much. It's not like Disney, where Disney buys things and kind of just lets them, they give it more money, but they kind of let them operate, autonomously for a large extent, which is interesting. I don't see Apple behaving in that way. I also see Apple, though, looking at Amazon going, oh, shoot. So we're behind Amazon in terms of voice technology. The Alexa is far, far, far ahead of where our Apple Assistant is or will ever be. Amazon's got content figured out. Amazon's got commerce figured out. So Amazon's doing a lot of stuff right now. And Apple, I think, is feeling further and further left out, especially when you add Google into the mix. Google's, got the hardware figured out. They've got their core business figured out. Google's not doing a lot of content on their own, but if you count YouTube, they are. If you count YouTube as a Google or an Alphabet subsidiary, YouTube's got a lot of just, user generated content. They're trying to figure out their studio model, but they kind of don't need to, because YouTube just on a user level is pretty strong. So Apple doesn't have anything other than Planet of the Apps. So it's like, it makes sense from a strategic point of view. I really hope it doesn't happen. I think Netflix needs to be its own thing, and it needs to not sell to another entity.
Yeah, especially because, one of the things that's helped Netflix flourish over the past few, 2-3 years is the net neutrality agreement. And, if that does get scrapped and providers start sort of throttling Netflix, I think it's better for Netflix to be a fully independent entity right now that customers demand, rather than become part of an Apple ecosystem that may alienate quickly, half the users in the US.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a wild idea that I have no actual good background to analyze, but that's just sort of what it seems like to me.
I think at some point it screws up Netflix's profit and loss model, because all of a sudden, if you've got a sugar daddy company owning you, who then says, guess what? Everybody who buys a new iPhone gets a free year of Netflix. So then, they're not getting that new revenue in. That changes how they fund certain shows or movies. They have a model very, very well figured out, an international content distribution model. It needs to be pure for as long as possible. It's not like Disney buying Fox, because what Disney was buying was essentially IP and production. There was nothing innovative about Fox. The movies, the movie TV side, there was nothing. It was just IP and talent is all they were essentially buying. I'm not a big fan of Disney owning that too. To some extent, I mean, there's some pros and cons, but just Disney owning all that IP scares me a little bit. But it's not like Fox is going to change inherently, especially because, like I said before, Disney tends to let these companies run autonomously. For the most part. So it's I just don't see Apple doing that. I was scared too when Apple was potentially going to buy Spotify for the same reason. I'm like, that's not a good idea. These companies need to live and die on their own accord, and only when it makes good strategic sense do we merge, or do we? I mean, I understand there's a big payout, but they're doing fine. Netflix is doing fine on their own. We don't need this.
Well, we need, we definitely need that's you allude to another great point, which is that Netflix is more than just a content distribution platform. It is its own studio. Yeah. And we need sort of robust studios that are creating, funding and creating new media, rather than consolidating all those, means of production. That's terrible. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on from Netflix. I kind of think we ought to wrap this up. We're right at the sweet spot here.
Oh, we are. Shoot. I do. Well, there's 3 other things I did want to talk about that we can push to another episode. One of them was the White Knight series that we've been both reading. Let's table that. Maybe we'll do a coffee. You know what we should do? Let's do a joint coffee and comics about the White Knight, because I think that could be an entire episode unto itself.
Well, do we know when the series wraps up?
I don't, but I think there's a lot to chat about, because I'll just throw this on the table as a teaser. This may be my favorite Batman story.
I mean, I can't say it's my favorite, but it has not yet wrapped up. So
that's true. It could go horribly wrong.
But I mean, yeah, but that's great. You have teased White Knight on on a different episode of Coffee and Comics. I know. Gosh, I just don't even. Yeah, it's a Batman book. How would you wrap it up? In how would you summarize the plot of the series?
I don't even want to go down that. I think if I start doing that, we'll have to talk about it. So let's just table all of White Knight for maybe next week. And we could also, Quentin Tarantino Star Trek. Good idea, bad idea? Does that impact you at all?
I don't, I don't care about Quentin Tarantino. So it doesn't bother me.
Fair enough.
It seems like a bad match,
I'm curious if they were rebooting from scratch, I would be into it, but I don't know how they're going to funnel his sensibility.
Oh, that's right. We're talking about a movie, not like an episode of Discovery or whatever.
Exactly. He's writing, not directing, but writing. No, somebody else is writing. He is directing it. He's directing, but not writing. I think he's the story is of his mind. the screenplay is by somebody else, and then he's directing it.
Is it definitely happening?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's happening. Yeah, absolutely happening.
Oh, how stupid.
I find it interesting that of all the things that aren't his own creation, that's the one thing that he's like, oh yeah, I'd love to direct that. I mean, maybe it'll be cool. I don't know. It clearly will not follow his normal like chapter 3, like the death of, or like
that's
Spock
funny.
Here's something like what?
I definitely misunderstood his involvement in whatever it was. I thought, man, I don't know what I was thinking, that it was somehow like just a TV episode that he was going to do, but gosh, what a terrible idea. I mean, there's nothing we've seen from him. I mean, he's super capable. I'm sure he can do any genre he wants, but his genre is largely his own sort of mix of Westerns and samurai films and this noir kind of, dark and bloody way of life. Handing him like the quintessential sci-fi series seems really weird.
But at the same time, he's directed episodes of television and stuff that you would never know it was him. So I think that it will probably feel more like that because there's a machine behind Star Trek, and he's almost like coming in as like a guest lecturer. He's like, okay, I'll do. Yeah. A lot of it's going to have some of his sensibility. It's going to be rated R, so that'll be interesting. But I don't see it being. Well, jury's still out, but I didn't know if you had any strong thoughts either way on that.
So will this count towards his 10 film retirement plan?
I don't think so. I think that is purely of his own creation.
No, that's not fair, Tarantino. It counts. It counts, man.
Yeah, but but like, does 4 rooms count? I don't think it does.
It does. Totally.
Does it?
So does True Romance.
Yeah, well, see, there you go. Like, if he's
time to retire, man.
If he's counting those, fine. But I don't think that's what we're talking about. The other thing I wanted to at least name check, because we haven't chatted about it, and it's super duper important. The Doctor Who Christmas special happened recently, and it was the famous episode where Peter Capaldi regenerates into Jodie Whittaker. And I'll say 2 things. We can talk about it later if we want to. It was absolutely the best Doctor Who episode I have ever seen. Ever. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. And I knew I would be emotional, but I had no idea I would ugly cry at the end of it.
Wow.
It hit me in such an emotional way. And I can articulate, I watched it twice. I actually watched it again last night, in case we chatted about it. And it happened exactly the same way the second time. And I think I know why I get so worked up about it. There are so many, everything about the episode, just the mechanics of it, even if it wasn't a regeneration episode, it would still be one of the best, if not the best, just because it really captures what's great about the show. They actually have the original Doctor make an appearance, and he's portrayed by David Bradley, who portrayed the original actor / Doctor in a sort of docudrama that they did a couple years ago as part of the 50th anniversary. So they brought him back to just play the first Doctor for real, which was great because he's perfect at it. He does a really good impression, but he also kind of brings his own thing to the table. And the whole conceit of the episode is that original Doctor doesn't want to regenerate either, and Capaldi's Doctor doesn't want to regenerate because he's been through too much and he just wants to end it. And so they both have to figure out how they move on, why they move on. And Capaldi, it's like a love letter to his character. He does his best acting, but he does this thing. I almost don't want to get into it because I'll start bawling again. He does this thing at the end. They set up the final sort of sequence. He says goodbye to some old characters and stuff, and that's really heartwarming and emotional. But then he gets into the TARDIS and he makes the decision that he is going to regenerate again. He's like, and he kind of does it almost like. He does it almost sort of just like he's resigned to it. He's like, what's one more life going to hurt? It certainly won't kill anybody. Like it's because he realizes he has to go on because more people will live and more people will be saved if he does. But then he goes, but if I'm going to, he's talking to himself as he's done throughout the whole show. And he goes, so if I'm going to do this again, and he starts talking to the next Doctor, he's like, I have a list of things for you to remember. And he starts like saying all these things that he wants the next Doctor to be. He's like, you're going to be he's like, I want you to be kind. I want you to remember this. Run fast. Like, always remember this. And he's listing off all this shit. And you realize, and this is, I think, why it hits me so emotionally, the way Capaldi plays it. And as he's giving this monologue, he's walking around the TARDIS. The blocking's really good. He's going upstairs. He's walking around, and he's at the end of his regeneration, so he's physically in pain. He falls down a few times, and his energy gets less and less as he's going through it. He gets quieter and more sort of. He kind of feels more sickly, and you realize what this is a dying father telling his new daughter what he wants for her to be in her life. And it's just like, and once I realized that, I was like, oh my God, this is him telling his daughter, I want you to be these things. Like, don't, remember this, do this, because I'm not going to see you again. And so when
do they always have like such a big regeneration episode where they're introducing the new Doctor?
Yes. Basically, when Christopher Eccleston, who kickstarted the new series again, regenerated, it was at the finale of season 1, and it was a bigger moment, but it was basically over in like 5 minutes. And it was actually a very classy. Christopher Eccleston's was always my favorite regeneration until this one, because it was really classy. It was, he realized it was happening, but it was optimistic but sad, and then he turns into David Tennant. David Tennant's regeneration was this big, like, whiny emo affair that I to this day can't stand. And it's like, I go back, I just shake my head every time I think about it, because I'm like, what a wasted opportunity. Literally the last words he says to us, the audience, are, I don't want to go. And he's just all sad and sappy, and it really bothered me. When Matt Smith regenerated into Peter Capaldi, it was a return to a really classy thing, but they really stretched out. It was another Christmas episode, so the whole thing was about his regeneration. But the last moment where he's in the TARDIS was really, really classy. Like, they sent Matt Smith out in a really good way. I knew when Capaldi came on, when he was cast, I just had this sense of like, oh my God, I'm gonna cry at his regeneration, just because I knew he'd be good. I don't know if I realized he'd be this good, but I knew he would be one of the best ones we ever had. And I have the same very visceral feeling about Jodie Whittaker. I really feel like she's going to be, if not the best Doctor we've ever had, at least up there with Tom. Like, as much as people love Tom Baker and David Tennant, I think she's going to be as beloved, but then also as good as Capaldi was. Because Capaldi's beloved, but he's not. I think because he was so good as an actor, he didn't have as many child fans as maybe Tennant does. Because Tennant was a good actor, but Tennant was also very accessible. Capaldi was a very challenging actor, and he actually, for the first time, created an arc for the Doctor. So like, where he starts and where he ends are very, very different as a character. I feel like Jodie Whittaker is going to be all of those things. She's going to be beloved, but she's also going to bring some really solid acting. So when Capaldi says his final line, he's like, his final line is like somebody, like, I imagine like an old man in a cancer ward dying. Like, that's really what you feel like. And he says this final line, and he turns into Jodie Whittaker. Like, when you see her, you're like, oh my God, everything she is going to be everything that Capaldi's told her to be. Like, you just know it by the look on her face. So just the whole thing is this very emotional roller coaster. And this is after, by the way, we see the first Doctor. They do this really classy thing with the first Doctor, where you see him start to regenerate, and they actually take the footage and they merge it back into the original black and white episode where you see the original Doctor regenerate. So they start it in the modern day with like the modern music and everything, and they transition it back so that it's completely within continuity. And it's just like, if just that alone happened, I would have shed a tear, because like, that was really well done. But then you get this entire 20 minutes of Capaldi just masterclassing this show. And then I got really emotional, the first time. And then I watched it last night, and the same thing happened. And that has never happened on this show. I mean, I've always loved it. I've always been emotional, but I've never just completely lost it. And
how can anyone watch it right now?
Great question, because it used to be on Netflix. It is on Amazon Prime. So I don't know if this newest episode is available on Prime. I always just buy them on iTunes or Amazon, so because I like supporting the show. But I think every other season, and I think this newest episode, if it's not, it will soon be. But it's all available for Prime streaming.
Cool. Wow. Well, I'm glad we covered that and pushed on, because we needed to talk about Doctor Who, and the farther we get away from Christmas and the more they get into the new series, it's, going to be harder to go back. So that's a good launching point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm excited. She comes back. The show comes back later this year. And I've mentioned this on I think a previous episode. It's going to be very different. Like, not only is it a female doctor, but it's a different sort of, instead of like just a female companion, she's going to have like an older gentleman and some other people as her companions. The show is being shot like Game of Thrones, so like on better cameras and everything. So it's just going to feel like it's just going to feel like we've gone up a notch again, just like we did when Stephen Moffat took over. It went up a notch in production. That show gets better and better and better and better. And I don't know how they do it. Anyway.
Huh. Cool. Well, where can people find this podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Stitcher, Google Play, Pocket Cast, wherever podcasts are discovered. We're actually on a new distribution platform, which I'm excited about. So that will be probably, I think I'm looking, hopefully we'll get on Spotify soon, because I knew that the new platform has that capability. You can also tweet us and Instagram us. We are Find Us There on both of those accounts. Still on SoundCloud if you want to find us there. And of course, findusthere.org is our website address. And we are actually launching a new website very, very soon. It may have happened before you even heard this podcast. If not, it'll happen soon after. And lots of really fun stuff there. A lot of our coffee and comics picks are going to be there. All our other shows are going to be there. So yeah, there is the name, and look for all our stuff on those networks.
Yeah, I would say anticipate another coffee and comics episode before another sort of pop culture, at large episode, because I'm primed and ready for this coffee and comics.
Excellent.
So great to catch up on all this stuff. I will catch you next week, Taylor, and you audience can find us in all those places. And we'll be back with coffee and comics soon, and the Todd and Taylor Show. Bye.
Bye.